Welcome to the mothergrid studio on this Wednesday. It's Women's Day today, and I've got two female guests invited, not because it's Women's Day, it's like a coincidence. And I would like to welcome with me on the left side Susanne Buchheim, who will present the results of her study she did, and on the right side a very warm welcome for Dr. Agnese Mariotti from the Webster University of Geneva. Ms. Mariotti, welcome to our little stream. And we are talking about stress today. It's not only us three who will talk about it. Everyone is invited to ask questions in the YouTube live chat, whether it is in English, German, maybe also a little French. We will try to translate everything, but we will keep talking English here in the stream. Okay, and as I said, stress is our topic. And Ms. Mariotti, you're dealing with the phenomenon of stress for several years. You told me before you were originally working on the topic of cancer, but were always interested in how those two phenomena like cancer and stress interact with each other.
Yes, so first of all, thank you for the invitation and good afternoon to everybody. So yes, it's true. So I've been interested in this topic of stress for many years, and one of my main interests was actually the possible link between stress and cancer development. I actually did a lot of research on cancer for many years, but I was never had the opportunity to study the link between stress and cancer. So there are papers published on it, so there isn't really a strong link. This is not the topic of this conversation. Maybe if there is time, we can talk about it later on. But apart from this, stress has remained one of the topics of the subjects I really I'm more interested in. And so even if I'm not really doing any research on stress very actively, so this Susanne had this great idea, and so it was really I was very happy to be able to join in her project. Anyway, stress is really one of the topic I like to study, and I'm following the medical literature on it. So I try to keep updated on what is happening in this research field.
Okay. Would you say that stress is something that could be more, that there could be more research about stress, or is it a topic that is very well researched so far, and we know at least, we know almost everything we can know about stress, or we should know about stress?
So research on stress has been developing especially in the last, I would say, 30 years. So of course, there's a lot, there are many studies on stress from a psychological point of view, as a psychological reactions that go back, of course, also to the beginning of the 1900s, but from a, let's say, biological and molecular point of view. So let's say really the mechanisms that are activated in our body. So better knowledge has come in the last 20, 30 years. There is research about it, and research is still going on, is still developing, but because there are many things that we still do not understand. And also, for example, the links between stress and many diseases, we know some about it, and also Susanne talks about this in her thesis, but a lot is still to be understood.
Okay.
So research is going on.
Yeah, and a bit of the research is today presented to us by Susanne. Susanne, what made you tick when you looked for a topic for your thesis? What was the idea behind talking about stress or doing a work about stress?
So the topic of stress has been with me for a while. In 2016, we had a very stressful period, and two of my closer colleagues died within a few months from a heart attack, and they were both exactly 50 years old. And I was really asking myself, like, could this be related to the stress that we are having at the moment that these guys died? Because it was just too much of a coincidence. And later, I developed a depressive disorder, and I was diagnosed with that. And during the healing process, I learned a lot about the connection between stress and depression. So that was for me also an eye opener to say stress doesn't only cause like physical illness, it also causes psychological illness. And then last year, when I was looking for a topic for my thesis, another two colleagues died of a heart attack, assumed heart attack, I have to say. And that was for me like, okay, now that's enough. I can't find anything about stress in the event industry. I need to do some research. I have to do the research anyways for the thesis, and this is a topic that really interests me, out of personal interest, really.
Okay.
That's when I started.
But wasn't it a bit of a surprise for you that obviously stressful business like doing live events isn't researched, or there is no literature to be found about it so far?
Well, there are a few associations, especially in the UK, that do research about it, and there are some polls where people are asked about whether they feel stressed and stuff like that. But it's not like a science where people are asked about whether they feel stressed and stuff like that. But it's not like a scientific research. But it has been acknowledged as an important topic, especially mental health, and especially during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay. Yeah, I would say if you could give us a short overview of the results of your thesis. Several months ago, you started a poll, which I think like 1,600 people took part, you will tell us. And
Yes.
now you will present us the results, and we will talk about it afterwards. And I repeat again, post your questions, comments in the live chat on YouTube, and we will try to get it into the show. So now it's up to you, Susanne.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, about the study, I created a research study with a questionnaire because I am studying at the Swiss School of Higher Education in Montreux, and I have 3 supervisors. One of us is here, luckily, today with us, Agnese Mariotti, but there's also David McPartland and Medina Kukinova, who helped with the statistics, which is also really not to be underestimated. Then underneath that, you can see the logos of lots of associations and people, mothergrid being one of them, who helped with the distribution of the questionnaire. And then underneath, that's you, the 1,142 people who completed the questionnaire. So now we're talking about some results. This is just a bit of demographics. I don't want to go into that a lot, but if you have any questions about the demographics, just feel free to ask them later. The first part of the questionnaire concentrated on seeing what kind of stressors we have in the events industry, identifying them. And in the questionnaire, people could say if they were exposed to a stressor, either never, almost never, sometimes, regularly, or almost always. And what you see here in this chart are only the people that said they are exposed to a stressor regularly or almost always. And you can see, for example, for time pressure, that 80% of the people in the survey are at least regularly exposed to time pressure. 70% of the people have not enough time for hobbies. 68% of the people have the exact phrasing was an unreasonable amount of overtime, and 65% of the people have not enough time for family and friends. I found that very interesting, and what strikes me most is that these 4 stressors, like the 4 main stressors, are all related to time management. Then the next part of the questionnaire concentrated on the stress levels. You can see the stress levels of the participants here, and I will quickly explain how that works. I used a tool to measure the perceived stress. It's called Perceived Stress Scale by Cohen. And it's a validated tool to measure stress. And Cohen did initial research about the stress levels in the US American population, and he determined an average stress level of the population at 13.06, sorry. And there is another huge research from Klein about the German population, and she says the average stress level of the German population is 12.57. So that's the average. And you can already see from the graph that our stress level is higher. The stress level of our survey group was at 16.96, so almost 17. And just to give you a perspective of how high that is, I digged up a survey about high-risk healthcare workers, and they had a stress level of 17. So that's like really close to our stress level.
Yes, if I may interrupt you for a second, like the medical workers, not to be misunderstood, it's not the people taking care of people after a surgery, it's really like the people doing the surgery.
High risk workers. So
working on open hearts, having lives of people in their hands, and like this stress level is comparable to the live business industry.
Yeah, at least that's what the survey says. Then I was thinking, because many people told me like you could put comments into the survey, and many people put the comment in, yes, I have all these stressors, but they do not stress me out. So I was thinking, okay, we have all these stressors and we have elevated stress levels, but can I somehow prove that there is a connection between those two? Or is it a coincidence? So what I did is I looked at the people who said they are exposed to the stressors either regularly or almost always, so high stressor exposure, and I checked their average stress levels and compared them to the average stress levels of the survey group. So not the stress level of the population, but of the survey group. So what you see in this chart is a yellow line, which is the average stress level of the survey group at 15.96. And then the white line indicates the stress levels by stressor of the people who have a high exposure to the stressor. So you can see that for every single stressor, the stress levels of those people who have the stressors often are higher than the average. And I also did that the other way around. I don't have the chart now, but I also compared the people who are exposed to the stressors never or almost never to the average, and they were all below the average. So I think that is a good way to see that actually the exposure to a stressor has some impact on the stress level. Now we get to a very interesting part, which is the symptoms and diagnosis. The symptoms are taken out of the burnout assessment tool, which is also a validated tool to measure. And the diagnosis, I took them out of the literature on stress. So there's a lot of research, as Agnese already said, to certain diseases like high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, stroke, cardiovascular diseases, and so on and so on. So I asked in the questionnaire, I asked the people if they experience any symptoms, stress-related symptoms, or if they have a diagnosis for a stress-related disease. And what you can see here in the symptoms part, you can see that the yellow crosses are the status of the general situation, whereas the red crosses are the status of during the corona pandemic, and the white crosses show the status of after the pandemic. And you can see that the symptoms of tendency to worry and muscle pain are the most often symptoms of stress that people had in the survey. And then you can see that the tendency to worry, which is already pretty high, went up a lot during the pandemic. And then it went down after the pandemic, but not back to the original level. And on the other hand, the muscle pain, that is also very high, went down during the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, I find this really interesting because you have to think that we were not working for 2 years. So our body relaxed, obviously, and then we had to start again, and then our muscle pain got really high. Another thing I find interesting in the symptoms is the noise in crowds. So the original phrasing was noise in crowds disturb me. So you can see that the noise in crowds disturb the people, but during the pandemic, this disturbance increased, and it stayed like that. And that could be one explanation for that could be that the crowds during the pandemic were associated with contamination of COVID-19. So people really didn't want to be in crowds, and this stayed like it didn't go back to normal because like our perception changed. And I move on to the diagnosis, where we can see that the disease that is diagnosed most is high blood pressure. And you can't see that in this chart, but you will be able to see that in the next one, that this is within the normal range. So it looks very high, but it is within the normal range of the general population. Whereas the depression, which is the last point on the chart, it's also very high. It is way above the normal, the average population. And you can also see that during the pandemic, the depression went up quite a bit. And the same happened for anxiety. During the pandemic, anxiety got worse, and it went back more or less to normal after the pandemic. And then you can see for burnout that the exact opposite happened. And people, or sometimes they mix up depression and burnout, but the burnout is when you have a lot of work and you have little reward. So when you work, you get burned out, and when you're out of work, the tendency to get burned out decreases. Whereas the depression, it's most often connected to a kind of loss. So if you lose your work, that could also be a reason for depression. That is why depression went up, and then once the work came back, the depressions went down again. So this is my last chart. Here I compared the percentage of diagnosis within the survey group to the percentage of diagnosis within the GSA group. That's Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. So you can see the yellow columns, they represent the general population, and the gray ones represent the survey group. And as I said before, high blood pressure, we are below the average. And one explanation for that could be that our survey group is a little bit younger than the average German, Swiss, and Austrian person. I don't know, maybe that makes a difference because high blood pressure tends to become worse with age. But if you look at all the other diseases, you can see that our survey group has many, many, many more diseases than the general population. And depression, I find especially striking, how much more that is. Then we have CHD, which is coronary heart disease, that is heart attacks, strokes, ulcers. The German word is Magengeschwüre or Geschwüre in general. Then burnout syndrome, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress syndrome. Yeah, and this is, I find this really, really interesting. And to be honest, I find it a bit frightening as well.
Okay, so this was it. This was these are the results. Thank you very much so far, Susanne. Agnese, when you look at these results, what do you think? Is it do the results surprise you?
So they are really interesting. Let's say, just to summarize what Susanne presented very clearly, the first finding is that the stress level in event workers is higher than the average. And it is quite high because, as Susanne was saying, this score is similar to what was found for healthcare workers who are very stressed. So that group of healthcare workers. So this is just the first important point. Then linked to this, I think that it's very interesting that this survey also allowed identifying stressors that are more specific for these workers. And the other important point is this link between stressors and symptoms and diseases. So the results are surprising because the stress level is quite high. So it is almost 17, that corresponds to a moderate stress levels that tends to high, but in any case, it's above the average. And then the other interesting conclusion, the other interesting observation is the link with the diseases. And Susanne has already pointed out a few aspects of this. So, for example, there is an increased blood pressure that is level, that is diagnosed, yet this increase is not much different from the average high blood pressure that is found in the general population. It is true, one possibility is that this group of people are relatively young, but I think there are also other possibilities. So, for example, Susanne said in her thesis that many people did not report diagnosis just because they didn't go to see a doctor. So I think that there is a good, it's possible that some of these conditions were not diagnosed because people, even if they felt stressed or unwell, they did not go see a doctor. I think it's easier for a person to go see a doctor if they feel depressed rather than if they feel, I don't know, they don't think, okay, I feel that I have high blood pressure, or maybe they feel anxious, but they do not make the connection. While if a person feels depressed, sooner or later, maybe will go see a doctor. Definitely, this high level of depression is really surprising. Also for one reason, I think, because if you look at different studies, it seems that depression is a condition that is diagnosed more often in women than in men. This sample is made especially of men, so the number of women is small. So you see that there is really a high number of people, presumably most of them are men, or at least, yes, most of them are men, who suffer from depression that is linked to stress. So I think that this is also a very interesting observation. These are definitely some of the first thing I can comment considering these results, but definitely there are many implications of this work.
Okay, so there are two things, if I may sum it up quickly. If I would say it a bit dramatized, people die for other reasons in the industry before they can die of high blood pressure, because there are many other reasons that cause them to die before they get old enough to develop high blood pressure. And the other thing is that depressions tend to affect women more in the overall society. And as we have about, I don't know, 85% of your
85% male and 14% female, yes.
And this double means that we have a lot more depressions arising or in the event industry. It
makes the number even worse, actually, because as Agnese said, women tend to have depressions more than men. So since our group is mainly consists of men, it makes it even worse.
Okay. Yeah. Were you surprised by the results, Susanne? I mean, one could say, yeah, I mean, it's live business. We have to go live 8 p.m. every day. Of course, it's a stressful business. So were you really surprised by the results of your survey?
Yes, I was totally surprised because I felt that there was an implication of the stress. That's why I did the research, because I wanted to prove that. But I got so much feedback from the people. They said, I never see a doctor. I can't tell you what's up because I feel like it might be true, but I don't have a diagnosis. So I thought I will never be able to collect enough numbers to say that this is a real problem. And I think especially on depression, we have really, really worrying numbers. And I never expected that.
Okay. And Now, the interesting question is there anything we can do about it? I mean, if I imagine working in a coal mine, I have a high risk of getting a dusty lung, and what I can do is I put on a mask or a filter. And if you're looking now at the event industry, what can be done about it? Are there working only the wrong people in the industry that can handle the stress, and we should look more for more resilient people? Or are there other ways that could lower those phenomena and the overall stress level of our industry?
Are you asking Agnese or me?
Whoever feels, maybe Agnese, yes. First, and then you, Susanne.
So first of all, sorry, yes, you can hear me. So I think that so in our society, it's normal to think that if we work, we are stressed. But if you think of it, it shouldn't be like that. I mean, it's normal that whenever you do something, you have a certain level of stress, but stress has also some good aspects. So stress is a normal reaction to a challenge. You know, whenever there is a challenge, whenever there is a potential difficulty, in our body, there is the activation of the stress reaction that allow us to face the difficulty. And so this is normal. So a challenging job will activate this reaction. What is not normal and is not acceptable is that this stress then becomes chronic. So a job that has responsibilities, it's fine that it is associated with a certain level of stress, because being stressed at a normal physiological levels allow us to be performant. Okay, so think at event industries, but also think, for example, of a surgeon who is doing an operation. It has to be very, very alert, very attentive, and this is the normal physiological stress reaction. When stress becomes chronic, so problems arise, and it can be linked to disease. So I think that in general, this concept of having jobs that lead to chronic stress is completely wrong. So there is something wrong at the basis of most jobs, and of course we can look at the causes. As in this case, as Susanne pointed out, there are a few stressors that she identified and that can be worked on very easily. So, for example, I just think she talked about also being exposed to very bright environment or dark environment. It's something that her samples identified as stressful. So this is something that could be corrected in some ways, or also a better management of job planning. So trying to, plan time in a better way to allow people to have breaks or to have more time for themselves. So I think that there are certain aspects that definitely cause stress in this sample of people, and that should be really taken into account in order to try to improve their work conditions. But in general, I think that the idea that a job should be associated with such high levels of stress that become chronic and cause disease, this is really a mistake of our society.
Okay, yeah, Susanne, now we have the solution. You go to your production manager and tell him, hey, boss, we need more time. And so the stress is gone.
Yeah, I mean, being a part of this industry, I know that there is a certain reluctance to change these things. And I know we have laws that say we shouldn't work more than 8 hours, and hardly anyone in the industry sticks to that, which is normal. A day is 10 hours. Everybody knows that, everybody does it. Still, when I think back to the days when I started working in the industry, a day was 12 hours. And somehow we changed that to 10. So it could be that we can change it to 8, which is actually already the law in all the free countries, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And I know that people say, no, it can't happen. It's too expensive. The client will never pay this, blah, blah, blah. But I understand all this. But still, is it really worth it that people get sick just because we can't adapt to changing times. I don't know. I'm not saying I have the solution for this. I'm just saying that, hey, we have a problem here.
And we have also one comment in the YouTube chat, and I may read it. It's from Sabrina, and she writes, "Who really has the time to take care for him or herself to see a doctor with a depression, aka bad mood, or just stress for the general, especially when you have to get back to business for a living now?" So
Yeah.
it's the time factor, which seems to be a very central and important aspect of all this stress in the event business topic.
Yeah, it reflects perfectly the situation. I mean, we've been out of work for years. We developed a depression, and now the industry is back, and we don't have the time to even see a doctor. I mean, yeah, for me, this is a perfect reflection of the actual problem.
Okay.
If I can point out something interesting that came out of this work, so it's not really related to this last thing that we said, but for example, Susanne said that this work was inspired to her by the fact that several of her colleagues died of apparently from heart attack. And so she was trying to make a relationship between stress and heart attack, okay? And the results don't really support this, because it seems that depression is the most diagnosed disease. Yet, I think that this does not completely disprove this association, because as we said, on one hand, people who have high blood pressure probably don't get it diagnosed. And then there is also another aspect that heart attacks is something sudden that can also be connected to anxiety. And so the anxiety level that as a diagnosis was quite high. You can see that there's a difference between perceived anxiety, so anxiety as a symptom that was pointed out by a relatively lower number of people, and anxiety as a disease that was diagnosed in a higher number of people. So it's also sometimes anxiety and worrying can be confused. Okay, so many people said, okay, I feel very worried, but they declared a lower level of anxiety. But then the diagnosis of anxiety was quite high. There are studies that show that anxiety can be associated with heart attack. And also anxiety can cause sudden changes in heart rhythm that then may lead to heart attacks. Not to mention then all the other changes that can take place at the level of the blood circulation, such as more fat, more lipids in the blood, and all these are linked to stress. But yet, we don't have diagnoses that support this. So I think that still the link between stress in event in industry and an increase in cardiovascular diseases, strokes, heart attack, I think is still, a valid hypothesis. So this work does not disprove that there is no link, but that I think one of the conclusion is that, as also our one of the comments that were made, that many people just don't see a doctor because they don't have time, because they feel so time pressured, they have to work, and they don't go see a doctor. I wanted to just make this comment.
Yes. Yes. Very. Yeah. And so, if I would try to find a conclusion now, as we're nearing us the end of this show. So, if you have any comments left, people in front of the computers out there, type it into your computer now. If we would try to find a conclusion, or what would it be? I think on the one hand, everybody should think about his own decisions. Where do I work? For whom do I work? How long do I work? For how much money do I work? Why do I work? No, but you get what I mean. And on the other side, also the environmental situation should change. So, but
yeah. I want to add something to that, because when we're talking about a solution, if I may, if we have
yes, sure, yes.
Yeah.
Go on.
I mean, from my point of view, the most important part is to get rid of the stressor. I stick to that, even if it's probably difficult and many people will disagree with me. But I think there's another maybe interim solution to deal with the stress, and that is because stress makes us to react to a life-threatening situation. So the stress reaction is the fight and flight reaction that we have when we face something life-threatening. But nowadays, the things that stress us, they are not life-threatening anymore. So, for example, if I am under time pressure or if I have other forms of pressure, it's not life-threatening to me, but still, my body reacts as if it was life-threatening. And that, I don't want to go into too much detail, but that's a biological reaction that comes from the times when we were still collectors and hunters, and we had to comply to our tribe, because if the tribe sends you out, you will die. But nowadays, if I do something and my production manager does disagree with me, and he says he kicks me out of the tribe, I won't die anymore. But my body doesn't know that. So I react as if my life is threatened. And for me personally, it helps if I'm in a stressful situation, it helps me to realize that my body is reacting to something that is actually not there. There's no life-threatening situation I'm facing. And for me, when I'm in a stressful situation and I just get some awareness of that, I can say, okay, calm down. This is my body reacting to something that's not there. And maybe that will help other people as well. I don't know.
Yeah. And this also works when standing in front of the fridge with all the chocolate bars in it, and you can tell yourself, no, sugar is not very rare nowadays. I can just close the fridge, go away. I will find it elsewhere. We have 2 more comments coming in, if I may read them. We have Extreme Tech writing, I guess the high quantity of self-employed workers also makes this a more difficult development in terms of reducing working times, as many individual parties have to act together to move the whole industry. And this is a discussion we have for a very, very long time in the industry. I think you will agree, Susanne, like that the self-employed people, they don't really have lobby. I mean, they have a lobby. We have now we
have the ISDV,
yes.
And I can only recommend to everyone, become a member, do some networking, speak with the others. It can only help.
Yes. And he adds also, but obviously those results absolutely show that those efforts will be worth it. Thank you very much for the important research. Here's to you, Susanne. And then we have LX guy writing, when in the last decades have we actually taken a break of 2 years? Going back to work 100% after not having been in this situation for so long certainly adds to the stress.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, and I think this could be a good finishing statement. And if there aren't any comments, or if Agnese or Susanne, if you would like to add something to the discussion, then
the only thing I can add is that yes, it's true. I mean, there are changes that should be made. So it's really a matter of developing policies for this type of industry and this type of workers, and maybe also trying to change. For example, Susanne was saying that the majority of people working in the event industry, they are freelancers. So also try to stabilize job contracts. I think that really some radical change should be made, that really at the level of policies, and this work really supports this kind of measures. So maybe it can really help. You don't have a lobby, but something is moving in that sense. So this can really give a good base. It's a good base, a good foundation to raise subjects and also to raise demands, I would say.
Yes, absolutely right. And at this point, I would like then to point out the misunderstanding that there is no lobby. There is, of course, a lobby, as Susanne said. Google for the ISDV, the Interessensgemeinschaft der selbstständigen Dienstleisterinnen und Dienstleister in der Veranstaltungswirtschaft, if I may say that, as quick as possible. And there is a lobby, but it needs to grow. So, and then I would say, at this point, say thank you very much to Susanne Buchheim on the left and Dr. Agnese Mariotti on the right for their time, their knowledge, and their effort in making the live event business industry a better place. Thank you very much. Also to the people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much also to all the people attending this live stream. If you liked it, please give me a thumb up, an abonnement, or make some comments. The negative comments push the algorithm more. Just a hint. And yes, thank you very much to all of you, and goodbye, and see you in one of the next streams.
Bye.